I'm talking very specific goals. And I'll kind of give an example. I know that there are times where my business owners they might not be paying themselves a paycheck, for an example. And so when I'm looking at a business budget in that particular scenario, and they're just bringing things over what I call via an owner distribution to their personal finances. And what we want to do, we want to bring that owner's finances, the owner's goals, into the budgeting process as well. So if there is something that you have not attained at this point in time, and it's one of your personal goals or it's one of your business goals, one of my favorite things, Matthew, about the budget, this is where I get really fired up, is because we can actually use the budget because it is forward looking over the next 2 months. We can actually plug in and play with some hypothetical numbers. I call it a stretch. And this comes from my corporate world background. But, basically what a stretch is, when we look at a budget and when we look at our bottom line numbers, now, because Matthew, you have your budget. When we look at bottom line numbers, I don't want for any of my clients just to have goals around the day in and day out expenses, because then we tend to grow our companies at the level that just kind of attain those day end expenses, whether it's for the business or whether it is for the personal finances. And so when we can put some goals and some stretches actually into the budget, when we together look at those bottom line numbers, when you go to sleep at night, it just seems like your mind starts to wrap around bigger aspirations, bigger numbers, bigger goals. And what tends to happen when we start to put things like that into the budget, we tend to start to run our business different. We tend to start to attract to us different clients that would have never opened up before, just because we're taking that step. We're taking that step to expand that budget, actually put in new expenses that when we're looking at the bottom line numbers, we might not want to, because we don't know in this moment how we're going to attain those goals. So I find, Matthew, that with a lot of my clients, we tend to hold ourselves back more than anybody else. And it's just because we're not using the budget process to open up and expand. We're just looking at the budget once we have it to use those as goals to attain those goals. But that's a very limited way to look at it. The budget can actually be the tool. We can put stretches in it, and it can then be that tool for this transition to take you from where you are now to where you want to be in a very real way.
Yeah, I really like that. I've studied several people in the past: Robert Kiyosaki, T. Harv Eker, Susie Orman, and Dave Ramsey, and they all have a little bit different spin on things. I know with Dave Ramsey, one of his first things he asks people to do is, as a baby step, is what he calls it, is have some money set aside for an emergency. When people are starting out and they may have some debt, they need to get their house in order. What does that look like to you? What first steps should people be taking when they go on this budgeting journey?
That is a great question. And especially for my business owners, I feel it is important. I can just use kind of my own company as an example. So basically day one, I had that personal budget. And then I also, day one of my business, I wanted to set up my company as if it was going to be a multi-million-dollar company day one. So with my first deposit of, I can't even remember, I think it was even less than $100 back then. With my first deposit, that's what I used to open up my bank account. And so I just wanted to make sure, and I had a business budget, which seems really silly to have a business budget before you really even have proven yourself. But my recommendation is to day one, set this thing up. So you're going to run it truly as a business. As far as the steps, when we look at the personal budget, because we want to be able to look to see, well, what does it cost to keep the four walls around someone's situation? Those are kind of Dave Ramsey's terms. We want to make sure, what will it take to keep the roof over your head, the food on the table, the lights on, and keeping that vehicle going. So we want to make sure that we understand what will it take in order to make that happen. So when I work with my business owners that have very, very variable income that's coming in, I take income off the table completely. Because to be honest with you, it doesn't matter to me what someone's business income projections are. It doesn't matter one single bit. The only thing that matters from a budgeting perspective is cash in the bank. And so the very first step, Matthew, would be to have that person lay out a budget, a personal budget, and then also lay out a business budget. And that business budget won't have a lot in it. It would have things such as a cell phone. It would have things such as internet, because those are two true business expenses. And we would want to be able to see and step back without putting any income in the budget, strictly looking at the expenses. I call it reverse engineering. And so we get to sit back with the preparation of that personal budget and the preparation of that separate business budget, even before you even possibly have a bank account to set up to support both. We want to take a bigger step back and look at those bottom line numbers, because the bottom line numbers will let you know, it'll be the guide as far as how much income, what the goals are, what I'm calling pay period by pay period. It's that artificial structure we're setting up. And so that way we know the goals well in advance, and we're able to see what is it going to take in order to, what income is going to be required for me to cover the personal expenses. So that's going to be the first priority. It's going to be to cover your personal expenses, because it's hard to breathe when we know that when the personal expenses are not covered. And then we are then able to focus on growing the business. But we've got to, first of all, Matthew, make sure that the personal finances are covered. And so back in my personal example, back when I started my company, I did not even have a laptop computer. We had just a family computer. And so I would start with my financial calls. I didn't have a proper office like I do today. And I took those first calls. I took them in my car. I was hoping that my dog wouldn't bark. I would take them outside on the front porch if the mosquitoes weren't too bad. We are in Florida. And I take them in my closet. And I had my notepad, and I would manually, literally calculate the budget while I was on the phone with someone. I would hang up the phone, then I would go to the family computer. I would key in the updates, and then I would email the budget to my client after that initial phone call. Do you know, because as a part of my company, I couldn't go into debt for this company to walk people out of debt with being a financial coach. It would be so inauthentic. But do you know how motivated I was? You know how motivated I was to earn money for a laptop computer? I was pretty dang motivated. And then eventually build an office so I'm not having to yell to the kids, be quiet. You know how that is, right? And so I was pretty motivated. And also by not going into debt for my business expenses, it really forced me to answer the phone differently, look at ways that I can reach out to, potential clients. I was very, very motivated, and I didn't have a bunch of debt that I had to clean up on the back end from business debt, because I didn't even go there to begin with. And just to take an even bigger step back, because I just don't want for anyone on this call to think that they're speaking to Miss Perfect Budget over here. How could you be where you are? We've made almost every single financial mistake possible. I used to work for a cell phone company, and I made pretty good money, and I made around, it was a good chunk of change. And so I woke up one morning and I literally felt dead to my soul. It completely caught me off guard. I thought I was going to work with that company for the rest of my life. And then I worked for them for another 2 years. And I knew that I was ready to go, but I didn't want to just go. I was literally waiting for the appropriate time for that. And I felt like there were magnets in my shoes walking me into the corporate world just for that paycheck. And so at the 2-year marks, I was there a total of 12 years. They went through layoffs that impacted my department. So that's how I left the corporate world. But the super sad part about our story is that we should have never been in debt at all. With the income that we had coming in, we should have never been in debt at all. And we had that, I was the primary breadwinner for our family. When we had that dramatic decrease of income overnight, that's when we went through the process of almost losing our home. I had every credit card maxed out to the point that literally, I have a letter right here. I'm going to pull it out real quick. I didn't know of another way, right? I didn't know of another way. The way out is debt, because that's basically the model that I had followed before. So basically, at that point in time, I received this letter because I'm trying to get new debt, because that was the way out. And it wasn't at all about doing a budget or anything like that. That's crazy talk. But this letter that I have here is from Citi. It goes, "Thank you for applying for a Citi card with a MasterCard. We regret we are unable to approve an account for you at this time because of the following. Your total credit obligations, which include outstanding credit lines, are too high to meet our approval guidelines when compared to your stated income." So translation, what this letter was telling me, they didn't quite say it this way, but they're basically saying, Sonja, we would be stupid. We would be stupid to loan you more money. So, really literally at rock bottom financially, we had to do something different. We had enough money coming in before to cover our stupid financial decisions. But now, I guess the best analogy is, there's this pool and there are these boulders at the bottom of the pool. And when that income level starts to subside, there's some boulders that start peeking out, and you don't want to dive into that pool. You really would like a nice sandy bottom. But we did not create that financial structure when we had the income really coming in. And we really hit rock bottom very quickly because of the financial decisions that we made. We just spent more than what we made. It was just a simple error in judgment. And I have a master's degree. Even before that, I have an accounting degree. Matthew, I work with very smart, I work with very educated people. There's a ton of guilt, there's a ton of shame, and there's this element of what is wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? I also work with CPAs who are like, Sonja, I get paid to do this for other people, and I really struggle personally because it's personal. So I just say, you know what? So from that rock bottom place, that's where we had to, we just really had to start to do things differently. We had to bring our lifestyle, and we never went to Hawaii, anything like that, fun, but we had to bring our lifestyle immediately in line with that income coming in. And unfortunately, we had a boatload of debt as well. So just to take you forward, a handful of years, it was between 8 to 9 years for us to completely transform our situation without that income coming in. And we were able to pay off those credit cards. We were able to pay off our home. We were actually able to save $135,000 of interest we did not pay to the mortgage company because we paid the home off early. And those dollars, I thought that would be a fantastic way to just kind of reward our financial decisions. But we just got fired up about this debt thing. And we just said, I had my moment. I just had my moment of, we're just not going to continue to live this way above our means. And debt was no longer going to allow us to if we wanted to. So we kind of slammed into our wall. That's basically how I started my company. My girlfriend who lived down the street, she called me up. She's like, Sonja, can you come over to our kitchen table? We don't know how you did that, how you ended up turning that around. And oh, by the way, 2 babies later, it shouldn't even work that way and on less income. And so I just went over to her kitchen table. We just started laying this out. So that's basically how I started my company. We have the cuts and bruises to prove that we did it wrong. So when I started my company, I didn't have excess money to start this company with. Like I said, I didn't even have a laptop computer. Our personal finances, we had to make sure we kept those 4 walls around our financial situation, the roof over our head, food on the table, keeping the lights on that vehicle going. We had to focus on those things before I could even invest in things like a luxury, which at that point in time was a laptop computer. But I was motivated, and I just knew I wasn't going to go into debt to grow this business to help people get out of debt when we were in the middle of debt. So we're now completely on the other side of that, 100%. But the burn of that, the sting of it, it's so close, I can still taste it. And I just get absolutely fired up because that weight, that guilt that we have on our shoulders is too much to carry. And the whole purpose to run a business is so that we're running it in the business, we're not running behind it. And the best way to complete that transition is to have that budget in place that is proactive. We can see what's coming up in advance, and we have immediate goals, not just for the business, but also personally. What is it going to take to keep our personal finances in business as well? And to be honest with you, the personal business is the most important business we're running. It is so we can take it home. But right out of the gate, we typically, for someone that's starting new, just like with my company, we typically don't make that transition. It's one that can happen faster or it can happen slower. But the income coming in is going to help us make those decisions, and our decisions with the speed will be based on the level of income coming in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love about working with you is how you break down the budget to be so drop dead simple. I mean, literally opening up a spreadsheet and manually going through the accounts. So everything at the end of our time together balances out. I mean, literally balances to the penny. So we know where every penny is going, where every penny came from. keeping separate my personal income versus my income from my businesses, and